Hey everyone, welcome back to Storyboard. I'm Heather. I illustrate on this show, and with me we have Blake, who always reads our fantastic stories to us. How you doing today, Blake?
I am doing well. We are.
Um,
Go ahead.
I'm doing pretty good up here too. Excited to get into today's story, but as always, let me show everyone. I finally
Oh yeah.
finished the render from last week or 2 weeks ago. Didn't get as far as last time as I wanted to because I was trying to do way too many details, but I did finish it. So here we go.
Da, da,
Here's our
da.
render from last week.
Oh wow! The floor is awesome.
Yeah, it's just kind of some stuff. Like I had kind of the basics, all the characters in, but I really hadn't finished up all the baskets of goodies in the room and stuff like that. So, and everybody's kind of looking like, ooh, food.
Yeah. So
Because
you
as we
got.
remember, they were kind of stuck in a snowstorm and were a little bit desperate. And they got to come into this Badger's little oasis for them. So that must have been a good feeling. And today we actually are finally going to get to see Mole's home, which should be fairly
Oh
exciting.
okay. And
Um,
you did New Jersey tomatoes and blueberries.
yes, I did. Where I live is the blueberry capital of the world, so I've always kind of got to represent Team Antioxidant there.
And Jersey tomatoes are the best. They're so good.
What are you guys known for down there in Texas? Is it barbecue?
Barbecue, and Mexican food. Oh my word, we have some great Mexican food, all kinds. There are multiple kinds.
Oh,
So
okay.
people in New Jersey don't understand that. Like people in Texas don't understand what a roll is.
Ah,
With
yes.
a, and so my New Jersey friend said, I would like a hamburger, but just without the roll. And they go, well, baby, no, we don't give you a dinner roll with your hamburger. And anyway, it's fun, the differences and stuff. So
Bit
we're
of
on
a
our
culture
last chapter
difference.
of Willow, Wind in the Willows. It's not the last chapter of the book. It's the last chapter we're doing, and we're kind of coming home. It's Mole's coming home moment, and then we're going to move on to another story after this one in June. And so we're on chapter 5, and here we begin. The sheep ran huddling together against the hurdles, blowing out thin nostrils and stamping with delicate forefeet, their heads thrown back and a light steam rising from the crowded sheep pen into the frosty air. As the two animals hastened by in high spirits, which, with much chatter and laughter, they were returning across country after a long day's outing with Otter, hunting and exploring on the wide uplands where certain streams tributary to their own river had their first small beginnings. And the shades of the short winter day were closing in on them, and they had still some distance to go. Plodding at random across the plow, they had heard the sheep and made for them. And now, leading from the sheep pen, they found a beaten track that made walking a lighter business, and responded, moreover, to the small inquiry, something which all animals carry inside them, saying unmistakably, yes, quite right, this leads home. It looks as if were coming to a village, said the mole somewhat dubiously, slacking his pace as the track that had in time become a path and then had developed into a lane now handed them over to the charge of a well metalled road. The animals did not hold with villages and their own highways, thickly frequented as they were, took an independent course, regardless of church, post office, or public house. Oh, never mind, said the rat. At this season of the year, They're all safe indoors by this time, sitting around the fire, men, women, and children, dogs and cats and all. We shall slip through all right without any bother of unpleasantness, and we can have a look at them through their windows if you like and see what they're doing. The rapid nightfall of mid December had quite beset the little village as they approached it on soft feet over the first thin fall of powdery snow. Little was visible but squares of dusky orange red on either side of the street where the firelight and lamplight of each cottage overflowed through the casements into the dark world without. Most of the low latticed windows were innocent of blinds, and to the lookers in from outside, the inmates gathered round their tables, absorbed in handiwork, or talking with laughter and gesture. Each had happy grace, which is the last thing the skilled actor shall capture, the natural grace which goes with perfect unconscious of observation. Moving at will from one theater to another, the two spectators, so far from home themselves, had something of wistfulness in their eyes as they watched a cat being stroked, a sleepy child picked up and huddled off to bed, or a tired man stretched and knocked out his pipe on the end of a smoldering log. But it was from one little window, with its blinds drawn down, a mere blank transparency on the night, that the sense of home and the little curtained world within walls, the larger stressful world of outside nature, shut out and forgotten, most pulsated. Close against the white blind hung a bird cage, clearly silhouetted, every wire, perch, and even to yesterday's dull-edged lump of sugar. On the middle perch, the fluffy occupant, head tucked well into feathers, seemed so near to them as to be easily stroked had they tried. Even the delicate tips of his plumped out plumage penciled plainly on the illuminated screen. As they looked, the sleepy little fellow stirred uneasily, woke, shook himself, and raised his head. They could see the gape of his tiny beak as he yawned in a bored sort of way, looked around, and then settled his head into his back again, while the ruffled feathers gradually subsided into perfect stillness. Then a gust of bitter wind took them in the back of the neck. A small sting of frozen sleet on the skin woke them as from a dream, and they knew their toes to be cold and their legs tired and their own home distant, a weary way. Once beyond the village, where the cottages ceased abruptly on either side of the road, they could smell through the darkness the friendly fields again, and they braced themselves for the last long stretch, the home stretch, the stretch that we know is bound to end sometime in the rattle of the door latch, the sudden firelight, and the sight of familiar things greeting us as long absent travelers from far oversea. They plodded along steadily and silently, each of them thinking their own thought. The moles ran a good deal on dinner, as it was pitch dark, and it was all a strange country for him as far as he knew, and he was following obediently in the wake of the rat, leaving the guidance entirely to him. As for the rat, he was walking a little way ahead, as his habit was, his shoulders humped, his eyes fixed on the straight gray road in front of him. So he did not notice poor Mole when suddenly the summons reached him and took him like an electric shock. We others, who have long lost the more subtle of the physical senses, have not even proper terms to express an animal's intercommunications with his surrounding, living on otherwise, and have only the word smell, for instance, to include the whole range of delicate thrills which murmur in the nose of the animals night and day, summoning, warming, inciting, repelling. It was one of these mysterious fairy calls from out the void that suddenly reached Mole in the darkness, making him tingle through and through with its very familiar appeal, even while yet he could not clearly remember what it was. He stopped dead in his tracks, his nose searching hither and thither in its efforts to recapture the fine filament, the telegraphic current that had so strongly moved him. A moment, and he caught it again, and with it, this time came recollection in fondest flood. Home! That was what they meant. Those caressing appeals, those soft touches wafted through the air, those invisible little hands pulling and tugging all one way. Why, it must be the quiet close by him at the moment, his old home that he had hurriedly forsaken and never sought again, that day when he first found the river. And now it was sending out its scouts and its messengers to capture him and bring him in. Since his escape on that bright morning, he had hardly given it thought, so absorbed that he had been in his new life and all its pleasures, its surprises, too fresh and captivating experiences. Now, with a rush of old memories, how clearly it stood up before him in the darkness, shabbing indeed, a small and poorly furnished, and yet his, the home he had made for himself, the home he had been so happy to get back to after his day's work, and the home had been happy with, he had been happy with, evidently had been missing him too, and wanted him back, and was telling him through his nose, sorrowfully, reapproachingly, but with no bitterness or anger, only with plaintive reminder that it was there and wanted him too. The call was clear. The summons was plain. He must obey it instantly and go. Ratty, he called, full of joy and excitement. Hold on, come back. I want you. Quick. Oh, come along, Mole, do, replied the rat cheerfully, still plodding along. No, please stop, Ratty, pleading the poor Mole in anguish of heart. You don't understand. It's my home, my old home. I just come across the smell of it, and it's close by here, really quite close, and I must go to it. I just must. Oh, come back, Ratty, please. Please come back. The rat was by this time very far ahead, too far to hear clearly with what the mole was calling, too far to catch the sharp note of painful appeal in his voice, and he was much taken up with the weather, for he too could smell something suspiciously like approaching snow. Mole, we mustn't stop now, really, he called back. We'll come for it tomorrow, whatever it is you found. But I dare say, stop now. It's late, and the snow's coming on again, and I'm not sure of the way, and I want your nose, Mole, so come on quick. There's a good fellow, and the rat pressed forward on his way without waiting for an answer. Poor Mole stood alone in the road, his heart torn asunder, and a big sob gathering somewhere low down inside him to leap up to the surface presently, he knew, in passionate escape. But even under such a test as this, his loyalty to his friend stood firm. Never for a moment did he dream of abandoning him, Mole, Meanwhile, the waifs from his home pleaded, whispered, conjured, and finally claimed him imperiously. He dared not tarry longer with their magic circle. With a wrench that tore his very heartstring, he set his face down the road and followed submissively in the track of the rat, while faint, thin little Smell, still dogging his retreating nose, reproached him for his new friendship and his callous forgetfulness. With an effort, he caught up to the unsuspecting rat, who began chattering cheerfully about what they would do when they got back, and how jolly a fire of logs in the parlor would be, and what a supper he meant to eat, never noticing his companion's silence and distressful state of mind. At last, however, when they had gone some considerable way further and were passing some tree stumps at the edge of the road, he stopped and said kindly, "Look here, Mole, old chap, you seem dead tired. No talk left in you, and your feet dragging like lead? We'll sit down here for a minute and rest. The snow has held off so far, and the best part of the journey is over." The mole subsided forlornly on a tree stump and tried to control himself, for he felt it surely coming. The sob he had fought with so long refused to be beaten. Up and up it forced its way to the air, and then another and another, and others thick and fast, till poor Mole at last gave up the struggle and cried freely and openly, now that he knew it was all over and he had lost what he could hardly be said to have found. The rat, astonished and dismayed at the violence of Mole's sudden attack of grief, did not dare to speak for a while. At last he said, very quietly and sympathetically, "What is it, old fellow? Whatever can be the matter? Tell us your trouble, and let me see what I can do." Poor Mole found it difficult to get any words out between the upheavals of his chest that followed upon another so quickly, and held back speech and choked it as it came. "I know it's a shabby, dingy little place," he sobbed forth at last brokenly. "Not not like your cozy quarters, or Toad's beautiful hall, or Badger's great house, but it was my little home, and I was fond of it, and I went away and I forgot all about it. And then I smelt suddenly on the road when I called, and you wouldn't listen, Brad, and everything came back to me with a rush, and I wanted it. Oh dear, oh dear. And when you wouldn't turn back, Ratty, you wouldn't turn back, and I had to leave it, though I was smelling it all the time. I thought my heart would break. We might have just gone and had one look at it, Ratty, only one look. It was close by, but you wouldn't turn back, Ratty. You wouldn't turn back. Oh dear, oh dear. Recollection brought fresh waves of sorrow, and sobs again took full charge of him, preventing further speech. The rat stared straight in front of him, saying nothing, only patting Mole gently on the shoulder. After a time he muttered gloomily, "I see it all now. What a pig I've been. A pig, that's me, just a pig, a plain pig." He waited till Mole's sobs became gradually less stormy and more rhythmical. He waited till all the last sniffs were frequent and sobs only intermittent. Then he rose from his seat and remarking carelessly, "Well, now we've really better be getting along, old chap, up the road again, over the toilsome way that we had come." "Wherever are you going to, Ratty?" cried the tearful Mole, looking up in alarm. "We're going to find that home of yours, old fellow," replied the rat pleasantly, "so you had better come along, for it will take some finding, and we'll want your nose." "Oh, come back, Ratty, do," cried the mole, getting up and hurrying after him. "It's no good, I tell you. It's too late and too dark, and the place is too far, and the snow's coming. And I never meant to let you know I was feeling that way about it. It was all an accident and a mistake. And think of the of Riverbank and your supper now." "Hang the riverbank and supper too," said the ratty heartedly. "I tell you, I'm going to find this place now, if I stay at it all night. So cheer up, old chap, and take my arm, and we'll very soon be back there again." Still snuffling and pleading, reluctant Mole suffered himself to be dragged back along the road by his imperious companion, who, by a flow of cheerful talk, endeavored, when at last it seemed the rat that they must be nearing that part of the road where the mole had been held up, he said, "Now, no more talking. Business. Use your nose and give your mind to it." They moved on in silence for some little way, when suddenly the rat was conscious, through his arm that was linked in Mole's, of a faint sort of electric thrill that was passing down the animal's body. Instantly he disengaged himself, fell back at pace, and waited at full attention. The signals were coming through. Mole stood a moment rigid, while his uplifted nose, quivering slightly, felt the air. Then a short, quick run forward, a fault, a check, a try back, and then a slow, steadily competent advance. The rat, much excited, kept close to his heels as the mole, with something of the air of a sleepwalker, crossed a dry ditch, scrambled through a hedge, and nosed his way over a field open and trackless and bare in the faint starlight. Suddenly, without giving warning, he dived, but the rat was on alert and promptly followed him down the tunnel to which his unnerving nose had faithfully led him. It was close and airless, and the earthy smell was strong, and it seemed a long time to Rat. The passage ended, and he could stand erect and stretch and shake himself. The mole struck a match, and by its light the rat saw they were standing in an open space, neatly swept and sanded underfoot, and directly facing them was Mole's little front door, with Mole's End painted in Gothic lettering over the bell pull at the side. Mole reached down a lantern from a nail on the wall and lit it, and the rat looked around him and saw they were in a sort of forecourt. A garden seat stood on one side of the door, and on the other a roller, for the mole, who was a tidy animal when at home, couldn't stand having his ground kicked up by other animals into little runs that ended in earth heaps. On the walls hung wire baskets with ferns in them, alternating with brackets carrying plaster statuary. Down on one side of the forecourt came a skittle alley with benches along it and little wooden tables marked with rings that hinted at beer mugs. In the middle was a small round pond containing goldfish and surrounded by a cockle-shell border. Out of the center of the pond rose a fanciful erection clothed in more cockle shells and topped by a large silver glass ball that reflected everything all wrong and had a very pleasing effect. Mole's face beamed at the sight of all these objects so dear to him, and he hurried Rat through the door, lit a lamp in the hall, and took one glance around his old home. He saw the dust lying thick on everything, saw the cheerless, deserted look of the long neglected house and its narrow, meager dimensions, its worn and shabby contents, and collapsed again on a hall chair, his nose to his paws. "Oh, Ratty," he cried dismally, "why ever did I do it? Why did I bring you to this poor, cold little place on a night like this, when you might have been at Riverbank by this time, toasting your toes before a blazing fire with all your own nice things about you?" The rat had no heed to his doleful self reproaches. He was running here and there, opening doors, inspecting rooms and cupboards, and lighting lamps and candles and sticking them up everywhere. "What a capital little house this is," he called out cheerfully. "So compact, so well planned, everything here and everything in its place. Well, we'll make a jolly night of it. The first thing we want is a good fire. I'll see to that. I always know where to find things. So this is the parlor? Splendid. Your own idea. Those little sleeping bunks in the wall. Capital. Now, I'll fetch the wood and the coats, and you get a duster. Well, you'll find one in the drawer of the kitchen table, and try and smarten things up a bit. Bustle about, old chap." Encouraged by his companion, the mole roused himself and dusted and polished with energy and heartiness, while the rat, running to and from with armfuls of fuel, soon had a fire. I'm sorry, wait one moment. My page got turned. Okay. "My friends," he went on, "I'm pleased to... Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Poor mole found it. Oh my gosh. Encouraged by his... Okay, soon had a... Y'all, my pages got messed up.
Oh no.
Soon had a cheerful blaze roaring up the chimney. He held the mole to come and warm himself, but Mole promptly had another fit of the blues, dropping down on a couch in dark despair and burying his face in his duster. "Rat," he moaned, "how about your supper? You poor, cold, hungry, weary animal. I've nothing to give you. Nothing, not a crumb." "What a fellow you are for giving in," said the rat reproachably. "Why, only just now I saw a sardine opener on the kitchen dresser, and everybody knows that means there are sardines about somewhere." They went in and foraged accordingly, hunting through every cupboard and turning out every drawer. The result was so very depressing after all, though of course it might have been better. A tin of sardines, a box of Captain's biscuits nearly full, and a German sausage encased in silver paper. "There's a banquet for you," observed the rat as he arranged the table. "I know some animals who would give their ears to be sitting down to dinner with us right now." "No bread?" groaned the mole. "No butter? No pate, no champagne," continued the rat, grinning. "And that reminds me, what's the little door at the end of the passage?" "Your cellar, of course. Every luxury in the house. Just you wait a minute." He made way for the cellar door and presently reappeared, somewhat dusty, with a bottle of beer in each paw and another underarm. "Self-indulgent beggar you seem to be, Mole," he observed, "denying yourself nothing. This is really the jolliest little place I was ever in. Now, wherever did you pick up those prints? Make the place look so home-like. They do. No wonder you're so fond of it, Mole. Tell us all about it, and how you came to make it the way it is." Then, while the rat busied himself fetching plates and knives and forks and mustard, which he mixed in a egg cup, the mole, his bosom still heaving with stress, and emotion relented, somewhat shyly at first, but with more freedom as he warmed to his subject. How this was planned, and how that was thought out, and how this was got through, how this was got through a windfall from an ant, and this was wonderful find and a bargain, and this other thing was bought out at a savings. His spirits finally quite restored, his visitor and quite forgetful of the supper they both so much needed. Rat, who desperately hungry but strove to conceal it, nodding seriously, examining with a puckered brow, and saying wonderful and most remarkable at intervals when the chance for observation was given him. At last the rat succeeded in decoying him to the table, and had just gotten seriously to work with the sardine opener when sounds were from the forecourt, without sounds like scuffing of small feet, and a confused murmur of tiny voices. Broken sentences reached them. Now, all in a line, hold the lantern up. Tommy, clear your throats first. No coughing after I say 1, 2, 3. Where's your bill? Here, come on. Do. We're all waiting. What's up? Inquired the rat, pausing in his labors. I think it must be the field mice, replied the mole with a touch of pride in his manner. They go round caroling regularly at this time of the year. They're quite an institution in these parts, and they never pass me by. They come to the mole end last of all every year, and I used to give them hot drinks and supper sometimes when I could afford it. It will be like old times to hear them again. Let's have a look at them, cried the rat, jumping up and running to the door. It was a pretty sight, and a seasonable one, that met their eyes when they flung the door open. In the forecourt, lit by the dim rays of a horn lantern, some 8 or 10 little field mice stood in a semicircle, red worsted comforters round their throats, their forepaws thrust deep into their pockets, their feet jiggling for warmth. With bright, beady eyes, they glanced shyly at each other, sniggering a little, sniffing and applying coat sleeves a good deal. As the door opened, one of the elders that carries the lantern was just saying, now then, 1, 2, 3. And forthwith their shrill little voices uprose on the air, singing one of the good old carols that their forefathers composed in fields that they follow and held by frost, or when the snow bound in chimney corners and handed down to be sung in the miry street to lamp-lit windows at Yuletide. Whew. Y'all, I messed up my pages, but I found my way. I was sort of like in the snowstorm trying to find my way back home right in front of you. But unlike the mole, my senses are a little dull. And it took me a while to find my way.
Couldn't sniff your way back to the right page?
No, I couldn't. But I want to tell you, way earlier in the story when they're talking about the pathways for animals, and then when in winter everybody goes inside their house, and so they're more free to roam around and take shortcuts. It reminded me of a story my mom and I would sit in the living room, and we had a big window right at the patio. And growing up, we didn't have fences in our yards, and the neighborhood dogs would come across the backyard, and they all followed the very same path, and they all came right across at a diagonal across our patio, right up to our window, and then turned and went around our house. And we kept watching them do it over and over again. And we finally decided that we were the pet highway, that this highway went right across our yard and right at the corner of our house. And I was remembering that as Mole and Ratty were looking into windows when people were in their houses in the winter time.
All right, I think I can call it here. Got most of the drawing in this time, so that's not too bad.
I'm glad I found my way, or you wouldn't have had the last paragraph of what you were drawing.
But it was just like,
It
what
would
are
have
these
made
little
no
mice doing?
So, anyway, mistakes happen.
Yep, they do sometimes, but I think it was a good story nonetheless.
It's a story about coming home, and especially at holidays, whenever, whatever the holiday is, it's kind of a good time to come home sometimes.
Yeah, and it's a good, place for Mole to like reevaluate what's been going on. Like he's had all these adventures and he comes home and he's like, well, who do I want to be now? Do I want to go back to my old life or do I want to keep adventuring? And spoilers for the rest of the book. We advise, you read it with your family, but Mole does have a few more adventures in store.
He does go back out of his house, but we're not going to go with him anymore. We're going to make a turn. And I do look forward to our next story, The Jungle Book. I grew up not really reading the book, but watching the movie. And then when my own children were young, my son watched that movie just over and over. I almost have parts of it memorized. But you know that movies aren't exactly the book. So the book will present some of the story differently. And The Wind in the Willows has been a challenge to read because of the language. It's almost poetic. There was a line today that had 5 or 6 words that started with P. and some of the sentences were complicated. And it was a challenge to read. I read that one several times before reading it to y'all, but it was still a challenge to read sometimes. And then when I numbered my page wrong, it really took you on a ride. But I've enjoyed the imagery and I've really enjoyed your art.
Yeah, it's been fun. So I'm looking forward to the next one when I can, as much as I've enjoyed drawing our little like rat and mole and little friends here, I'm looking forward to drawing some new friends now.
Blue, I know some of the names. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bear, and I think there's a jaguar in it, and maybe some wolves, I think. I've actually never read the book. I saw the movie, of course.
Yeah. I haven't either. And the first part of the book is kind of hard because, anyway, we'll get to it at our next time we meet. But I look forward to reading that, The Jungle Book.
Yep. And thank you all so much for joining us. We appreciate when you watch this. We appreciate it if you share it with other people you know that you think might enjoy it. And remember to click on the like and subscribe button so you know whenever we're doing a new stream. And we thank you so much for joining us on this adventure. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.